Hey, tonight we're diving into one of the most fascinating and terrifying civilizations in history, ancient Greece. We're going to explore a world where gods walked among mortals, where divine punishment was swift and terrible, and where your everyday life was completely intertwined with beings who could destroy you on a whim. But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Greece, somewhere around the 5th century BCE. The morning light filters through the simple windows of your modest stone house, and the smells of baking bread and olive oil drift through the air. Your first instinct might be to yawn, stretch, and go about your day like you would in the modern world. Good news, you'll get to enjoy the beautiful Mediterranean climate and some of the most remarkable art, philosophy, and architecture ever created. Bad news, you are now living in a world where immortal, all-powerful beings could end your existence because you forgot to offer them a portion of your dinner. As you rise from your sleeping pallet, forget modern mattresses you've been resting on stuffed wool or straw. Your first priority isn't checking your phone or brewing coffee. Instead, you must acknowledge the household gods. In the corner of your main room stands a small shrine. Just a simple altar with carved figures representing Zeus, the king of gods, Hestia, goddess of the hearth, and perhaps Hermes, protector of the household. You take a moment to pour a small libation of water or wine, murmuring a quick prayer for protection. This isn't just some quaint tradition, it's a matter of survival. The gods are watching, always watching, and they expect acknowledgement. The gods expect proper reverence, your neighbour once told you after you'd carelessly walked past a roadside shrine without a nod of respect. Remember what happened to Niobe? She boasted that her 14 children made her superior to Leto, who only had 2. Apollo and Artemis, Leto's children, killed all 14 of Niobe's children with arrows. The gods turned her to stone, and even now she weeps eternally. You hadn't believed such tales at first, thinking them mere superstitions. You do now. As you step outside into the narrow street, the city is already bustling with activity. Men in simple tunics hurry toward the Agora, the central marketplace and gathering place. Women balance water jugs on their heads as they return from the public fountain. Children chase each other, playing with simple wooden toys, and everywhere are reminders of the gods. You pass a small roadside altar to Hermes, and you make sure to acknowledge it with a slight bow. At the corner stands a herm, a stone pillar with the head of Hermes and, yes, prominent genitalia, guarding the intersection. Before the great sacrilege of 415 BCE, when Vandals mutilated many of Athens' herms and sparked a political crisis, these divine markers stood unmolested throughout the city. No one would dare risk divine wrath. As you make your way toward the Agora to purchase food for the day, you notice a procession winding through the streets. White-robed priests lead a decorated bull, its horns gilded and wrapped with garlands. Today must be a festival day for one of the gods, perhaps Apollo or Athena. The city observes dozens of religious festivals throughout the year, each requiring proper observance. "Will you attend the sacrifice?" asks a friend who falls into step beside you. "Of course," you reply, knowing that absence might be noted by your neighbours, or worse, by the gods themselves. Religious festivals weren't just spiritual observances, they were civic duties. The health of the city-state depended on maintaining proper relations with the gods. When the plague struck Athens in 430 BCE, many believed it was divine punishment for some offence. During the Peloponnesian War, military expeditions were delayed if the omens weren't favourable. The gods' will permeated every aspect of Greek life. At the temple, you join the crowd gathering to witness the sacrifice. The massive marble columns soar above you, painted in vibrant colours. Contrary to the pristine white ruins we imagine today, Greek temples were colourful affairs adorned with red, blue and gold paint. The bull is led to the altar, which stands outside under the open sky. The animal is sprinkled with lustral water, causing it to nod its head, a sign interpreted as willing consent to its fate. The priest raises the knife, slits the bull's throat in one practiced motion, and catches the blood in a bowl. Some is sprinkled on the altar as an offering. The animal is butchered expertly, with certain portions, typically bones wrapped in fat, burned as the gods' share. The rest of the meat will be distributed for a communal feast. In ancient Greece, meat was a luxury usually enjoyed only during religious festivals. As the smoke rises to the heavens, you join in the prayers, hoping the gods find the offering acceptable. Good news, if they do, the community will prosper. Bad news, if they don't, the consequences could be dire. After the ceremony, you wander through the Agora, the heart of Athenian civic life. Merchants call out, advertising fresh fish, pottery, and imported luxuries. Philosophers gather with students engaged in animated debate. A herald announces upcoming assembly meetings and court cases. Every aspect of life here revolves around the community. The ancient Greeks invented democracy, but they didn't value privacy or individualism as we do today. In one corner of the Agora, you notice a small crowd gathered around a man gesturing excitedly at the sky. He's explaining that lightning and thunder aren't signs of Zeus's anger, but natural phenomena caused by disturbances in the air. Some in the crowd nod appreciatively at this scientific explanation, but others look concerned. Such talk borders on impiety, and impiety is dangerous. You recall the fate of the philosopher Anaxagoras, who suggested the sun was not the god Helios riding his fiery chariot, but merely a hot rock in the sky. He was charged with impiety and forced to flee Athens, or Socrates, condemned to death partially for not believing in the gods of the state. Even in Athens, the cultural centre of the Greek world and birthplace of philosophy, questioning religious orthodoxy carried serious risks. As midday approaches, you stop at a tavern for a simple lunch, bread dipped in wine, olives and a bit of cheese. The Greeks typically ate a light meal at midday and a larger dinner in the evening. You overhear men at the next table discussing news of a naval victory, attributing it to Poseidon's favour. One man suggests that the general's skill deserved more credit than divine intervention. His companions quickly shush him. "Be careful," one whispers. "Remember what happened to Ajax?" Ajax the Lesser, one of the Greek heroes of the Trojan War, had boasted that he survived a shipwreck despite Poseidon's wrath. For this hubris, excessive pride challenging the gods, Poseidon split the rock where Ajax had found refuge and drowned him. The gods did not tolerate being upstaged. After lunch, you decide to visit the Gymnasium, where men exercise, train, and socialise. The Gymnasium is another uniquely Greek institution devoted to the development of both body and mind. Men exercise naked. The word gymnasium comes from the Greek word gymnos, meaning naked, engaging in wrestling, running, and discus throwing. Afterwards, they might attend lectures or discussions on philosophy, politics, or poetry. As you watch the athletes, a young man tells you how the first Olympic Games were established to honour Zeus. The victors received only simple olive wreaths as prizes, but the glory of winning endured for a lifetime. The Games were so sacred that even warring city-states declared truces during the Olympic period to allow athletes safe passage to the sanctuary at Olympia. The gods love excellence, he explains. When we strive for Arete, excellence and virtue, we honour them. But when we become too proud of our achievements, he trails off, not needing to finish the thought. You both understand. The gymnasium empties as afternoon fades into evening. You head home, stopping at a well to draw water for the household. Daily life in ancient Greece involved constant labour just to maintain basic necessities. Without running water, electricity, or any modern conveniences, simple tasks consumed hours of each day. Arriving home, you prepare a simple dinner. Before eating, you carefully set aside a portion as an offering to the gods, pouring a small libation of wine onto the household altar. This daily ritual acknowledges the gods' supremacy and your dependence on their favour. Every meal begins with this act of devotion. As darkness falls, oil lamps provide dim illumination. Without electric lights, the rhythm of life followed the sun. Most Greeks were in bed shortly after sunset, especially in winter when nights were long. But tonight, your neighbour has invited you to a symposium, a drinking party where men recline on couches, share wine, and engage in conversation about everything from politics to poetry. The symposium begins with libations to the gods, first to the Olympians, then to the heroes, and finally to Zeus the Saviour. The wine flows freely, though it's mixed with water in a large crater. Drinking unmixed wine was considered barbaric. As the evening progresses, the conversation turns to a recent incident that has the city buzzing. A wealthy merchant, known for his success and increasingly lavish lifestyle, had publicly declared that his prosperity came from his own cleverness rather than divine favour. The next day, his largest ship sank in a sudden storm, taking his fortune to the bottom of the sea. No one seems particularly surprised by this turn of events. Hubris, an older man says solemnly, the gods cannot abide it. You nod in agreement, having quickly learned this fundamental principle of Greek life. Hubris, excessive pride or arrogance, especially when it challenged divine prerogative, invited nemesis, divine retribution. The gods maintained cosmic balance by humbling those who rose too high. The symposium winds down as the night grows late. Walking home through dark streets, you pass by temples where eternal flames burn, providing reassuring points of light. Nighttime in an ancient city was profoundly dark, with only the stars, moon, and occasional lamps to guide travellers. Back home, before retiring to your sleeping pallet, you pay one final visit to the household shrine. You murmur thanks for the day's safety and prosperity, however modest, and ask for protection through the night. In a world where the gods could bring disaster at any moment, storms, earthquakes, plagues, or personal calamities, constant piety was your only insurance. As you drift off to sleep, you reflect on your day in ancient Greece. The omnipresence of the gods has made you more mindful, more attuned to the world around you. Every action carries potential significance. Every success must be met with humility and gratitude rather than pride. You've begun to understand that to survive in this world, you must acknowledge powers greater than yourself. Good news. This awareness brings a certain richness to life, a depth of meaning to even simple actions. Bad news. One misstep, one forgotten offering, one moment of excessive pride could bring divine wrath raining down upon you. Tomorrow, you'll wake and begin again, navigating this complex relationship between mortal and divine. For now, though, you sink deeper into slumber, dreaming perhaps of gods and heroes, of Mount Olympus and the realms beyond, dreams sent, according to the Greeks, by the gods themselves. The gentle rhythm of the Mediterranean night envelops you, the soft sounds of the ancient world, so different from our mechanical modern cacophony, creating a soothing backdrop as consciousness fades. Far above, the stars wheel in patterns recognized and named by the Greeks, each constellation telling its own divine story. And the gods, for tonight at least, seem content to let you rest in peace. You wake to the gentle light of dawn filtering through your window. As your eyes adjust, you notice a small brown spider weaving an intricate web in the corner of the ceiling. You watch it for a moment, reminded of poor Arachne, who dared to challenge the goddess Athena to a weaving contest. Though Arachne's work was flawless, perhaps even better than the goddess's, her pride cost her everything. Athena, enraged by both the girl's skill and her tapestry depicting the gods' misdeeds, struck her repeatedly and transformed her into the first spider condemned to weave for eternity. Pride before the gods, you whisper to yourself, is the shortest path to ruin. You rise and perform your morning devotions at the household shrine more carefully than yesterday. The tale of Arachne has made you extra cautious. After washing your face with water from a clay basin, you dress in a simple chiton, a tunic made of 2 rectangles of lightweight wool or linen, pinned at the shoulders and belted at the waist. Women wear longer chitons that reach to the ankles, while men's typically fall to the knees. Today, rather than heading to the Agora, you decide to journey to a nearby sacred spring to collect water thought to have healing properties. The Greeks attribute special powers to certain natural features, springs, caves, mountain peaks, believing them to be dwelling places of nymphs, minor nature deities who serve as caretakers of the natural world. As you leave the city walls behind and follow the well-worn path through olive groves, you reflect on how thoroughly the gods have shaped this landscape. Every feature has its associated deity or myth. That mountain to the west, the sleeping form of a giant turned to stone by Athena. The constellation overhead last night, the hunter Orion, placed among the stars by Artemis. The natural world isn't just inhabited by the gods, it is literally formed from divine action. The sacred spring lies in a small grove of ancient plane trees. A simple stone altar stands nearby, adorned with offerings, small clay figurines, ribbons, a lock of hair tied with string. You aren't alone. Several other people have come to collect the healing waters or leave petitions for the nymphs. An elderly woman sits on a stone bench watching the clear water bubble up from between moss-covered rocks. She smiles as you approach. "Come for the nymph's blessing?" she asks. You nod, kneeling beside the spring with your clay vessel. "I was healed here once," she tells you, her voice soft with memory. "As a girl, my eyes were failing. My mother brought me here for 9 consecutive days at dawn. We made offerings and bathed my eyes with the sacred water. By the 9th day, I could see clearly again." "The nymphs were kind to you," you reply. "The gods give and the gods take away," she says with the simple acceptance of someone who has lived long in this world of divine caprice. "My brother was a fisherman who once kept his entire catch instead of offering a portion to Poseidon. The next day his boat was dashed against the rocks, though the sea had been calm when he set out." You've heard dozens of such stories by now, tales of divine punishment following seemingly minor infractions. While collecting water, you make sure to pour a small libation back into the spring as an offering, whispering thanks to the nymphs. On your return journey, you pass farmers working in terraced fields. Agriculture in rocky, mountainous Greece requires constant labour for modest returns. As in everything, farmers must acknowledge the gods who control their fate, particularly Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and her daughter Persephone. A farmer looks up from his work and waves in greeting. "Fine day Demeter has blessed us with," he calls. "Indeed," you answer. "May your crops grow strong under her care." The farmer nods appreciatively at your proper acknowledgement of the goddess. "We're preparing for the Thesmophoria," he explains, referring to an important festival dedicated to Demeter. "Women only," he adds with a wink. "My wife and daughters will participate while I mind the farm." The Thesmophoria was one of many women-only religious festivals in ancient Greece, giving women rare religious authority in an otherwise male-dominated society. For 3 days, women would leave their homes to camp at the sanctuary of Demeter, performing secret rituals that men were forbidden to witness. The festival ensured fertility, both of the crops and of the women themselves. As you continue toward the city, you encounter a small procession coming the opposite direction. People carry branches and flowers, singing a hymn. At their center walks a young girl dressed in a special robe, her hair adorned with blossoms. She's being escorted to serve as an Arephoros, one of the young girls selected for a year of service to Athena on the Acropolis. It's considered a great honour for a family to have a daughter chosen for this religious role. The Arephoroi, typically girls between 7 and 11 years old, live on the Acropolis for a year, weaving the sacred peplos robe for Athena's statue and performing mysterious nighttime rituals. The position connects noble families to the city's patron goddess and brings divine favour. You respectfully step aside to let the procession pass, lowering your eyes as the sacred girl walks by. Religion in ancient Greece isn't merely a set of beliefs, it's a complex web of roles, rituals and relationships that structure society itself. Back within the city walls, you decide to visit the Acropolis, the sacred high point of Athens, where the most important temples stand. The steep path upward is crowded with people, citizens coming to pray, officials performing duties, visitors from other city-states marvelling at Athens' magnificence. At the top, you pause to catch your breath, taking in the spectacular view. The massive Parthenon dominates the Acropolis, its marble gleaming in the sunlight, vibrant painted details visible even from a distance. This temple, dedicated to Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin, houses one of the most awe-inspiring cult statues in the Greek world, a towering figure of the goddess made of gold and ivory, created by the master sculptor Thesius. You notice a group of men in heated debate near the entrance to the Erechtheion, another important temple on the Acropolis. Drawing closer, you realise they're discussing reports of unfavourable omens regarding a proposed military expedition. The entrails were darkened, insists an elderly priest, and the sacred chickens refuse to eat. We cannot proceed without risking Athena's displeasure. Delays will cost us our advantage, argues a younger man in the fine cloak of a military commander. Perhaps another sacrifice? The signs were clear, the priest interrupts firmly. Would you risk the fate of Agamemnon? You understand the reference immediately. Agamemnon, the legendary king who led Greek forces against Troy, had offended Artemis by boasting that he was a better hunter than the goddess. As punishment, she becalmed the Greek fleet, preventing their departure for Troy. The seer, Calchas, revealed that only the sacrifice of Agamemnon's daughter Iphigenia would appease the goddess. Though versions of the myth differ on whether Iphigenia was actually sacrificed or rescued by Artemis at the last moment, the morale was clear. Divine will supersedes human plans even for kings. The military commander appears chastened. We will wait, he concedes. Let us consult the oracle at Delphi for further guidance. This deference to divine signs wasn't superstition to the Greeks, but practical wisdom. Ignore the gods at your peril. Even the most powerful men knew better than to proceed against unfavourable omens. You continue your exploration of the Acropolis, stopping to leave a small offering at the altar of Athena Nike, Athena of Victory. Around you, other worshippers perform their own devotions. A woman praying for her son's safe return from a sea voyage, an athlete seeking the goddess's favour in upcoming games, a craftsman offering thanks for a completed commission. As you descend from the Acropolis, you pass the theatre of Dionysus, where tragedies and comedies are performed during festivals honouring the god of wine and ecstasy. The stone seats carved into the hillside provide a natural amphitheatre with excellent acoustics. Today, Workers are preparing the space for upcoming performances, sweeping the orchestra, the circular performance area, and making repairs to the skene, the background building used by actors. Theatrical performances in ancient Greece weren't merely entertainment, but religious rituals honouring Dionysus. The tragedies, particularly those by the great playwrights Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, often explore humanity's relationship with the gods and the consequences of hubris. Through these dramatic presentations, Athenians collectively examine the moral and religious foundations of their society. By now, the afternoon heat has intensified and you seek refreshment at a public fountain house. These structures, often decorated with sculptures of water nymphs, provide the city's water supply. Women gather here not just to collect water but to socialise, exchanging news and gossip while their large clay hydriae, water jars, fill. You overhear two women discussing a scandalous incident from the previous night. They say he mocked the mysteries, one whispers, referring to the secret Elusinian mysteries, sacred rituals dedicated to Demeter and Persephone that promised initiates a blessed afterlife. Surely not, the other responds, glancing around nervously. That would be impiety of the highest order, the first woman finishes. The assembly will certainly exile him if the charges prove true. Religious offences were taken extremely seriously in ancient Athens. In 415 BCE, the statesman Alcibiades was recalled from a military expedition to face charges of mocking the Eleusinian mysteries at a private gathering. Rather than face trial, he defected to Sparta, Athens' enemy in the Peloponnesian War. Such was the severity of religious crimes. As evening approaches, you decide to visit a small sanctuary of Asclepius, the god of healing, located on the southern slope of the Acropolis. People with ailments come here to sleep within the sacred precinct, hoping that Asclepius will visit them in dreams and either cure them directly or prescribe treatments. The sanctuary is peaceful as the day's heat begins to fade. Suppliants prepare simple pallets where they'll sleep tonight, while priests perform purification rituals. On the walls hang votive offerings, small metal or terracotta replicas of healed body parts, hands, feet, eyes, left by grateful patients as thanks for divine healing. A physician tends to a man with a wounded leg, cleaning and bandaging it. In ancient Greece, medicine combined practical treatments with religious healing. Physicians like Hippocrates were developing more scientific approaches to healing, but most people still attributed both illness and recovery to divine action. As you observe the sanctuary's activities, a priest approaches. "Are you seeking the god's healing?" he asks. "Just observing today," you reply, "though I'm curious about the dream healing." The priest smiles. Asclepius comes to the worthy in dreams, sometimes accompanied by his sacred snakes. He gestures to a non-venomous serpent gliding along the sanctuary wall. The snakes are his messengers, embodiments of renewal as they shed their skins and emerge renewed. Sacred animals were associated with many Greek gods: Zeus's eagle, Athena's owl, Poseidon's horse, Artemis's deer, and Asclepius's snake. These creatures were considered especially dear to their respective deities and sometimes served as divine messengers or embodiments. As dusk falls, you leave the sanctuary and head toward home. The streets grow quieter as people retreat to their dwellings. Without widespread street lighting, nighttime in an ancient city was a time to be indoors. Those who ventured out carried small oil lamps to light their way, and often travelled in groups for safety. Passing a modest house, you hear singing, a mother teaching her daughter a hymn to Artemis that she'll need to know for an upcoming festival. Religious education happened primarily in the home, with parents teaching children the proper rituals, prayers, and myths necessary for navigating relationships with the gods. Upon reaching your own dwelling, you light the household lamps and prepare a simple evening meal. As always, you set aside the first portion for the gods, pouring a libation of wine. Good news, this daily practice helps maintain divine favour for your household. Bad news, neglecting it even once could invite disaster. After your meal, you sit by lamplight, perhaps working on household tasks like spinning wool or mending garments. Without electronic entertainment, evenings in ancient Greece were spent in conversation, telling stories, making music, or completing necessary work by lamplight before retiring early. Before sleep, you visit the household shrine once more. In the flickering light, the small figurines of the gods seem almost alive, as if watching your every move with their painted eyes. You bow your head in reverence, offering a final prayer for continued protection through the night. As you settle onto your sleeping pallet, you reflect on the day's experiences. Living in ancient Greece means living in constant awareness of the divine presence. Every action, from the most mundane to the most significant, occurs under the watchful eyes of the gods. Their favour brings prosperity, their displeasure brings ruin. You've witnessed both the comfort and the anxiety this relationship produces, the reassurance of divine protection when properly honoured, and the terror of divine retribution when offended. The gods are neither fully benevolent nor malevolent, but capricious forces requiring constant propitiation. As sleep begins to claim you, your last conscious thoughts are of tomorrow's religious obligations, a minor festival requiring attendance at a temple across the city. In ancient Greece, the religious calendar structures time itself, dividing the year into sacred periods dedicated to different deities and commemorating mythic events. Your breathing slows, your muscles relax, and you drift into dreams, perhaps sent by the gods themselves. In Greek belief, significant dreams were divine messages requiring interpretation. Morpheus, god of dreams, shapes the visions that visit mortals in sleep, sometimes revealing prophecies or divine instructions. The gentle Mediterranean night wraps around you like a blanket, stars shining through your window, stars that to ancient Greek eyes form the constellations of their divine stories. Perseus, Andromeda, Orion, the Pleiades. The sky itself is a tapestry of myth, a constant reminder that even when you sleep, the realm of the gods surrounds you, inescapable and eternal. You're awakened before dawn by distant sounds, drums beating slowly, flutes playing a haunting melody. Groggily, you rise and look out your window. Torchlight flickers in the streets as a procession winds its way through the city. With a start, you remember, today marks the beginning of the mysteries of Dionysus, one of the ecstatic cult celebrations that stands apart from the more orderly civic religion of the polis. Curiosity piqued, you dress quickly and step outside. The procession has already passed your street, but you can follow the sound and the trail of scattered flower petals. The Dionysian revellers, mostly women called maenads, are heading out of the city toward the wilderness of the surrounding hills, where they'll perform secret rituals far from male eyes. Dionysus, you know, is different from the other Olympian gods. The last to join their divine company, he represents the wild, irrational forces that civilization normally keeps in check. His worship involves wine-induced trance states, frenzied dancing, and sometimes, according to disturbing tales, the tearing apart of animals, or even humans, with bare hands. Good news, these Dionysian rites provide a rare opportunity for women to escape domestic confinement and experience religious ecstasy. Bad news, the wild abandon sometimes leads to genuine violence and madness. You don't dare follow the maenads into the hills. Their rituals exclude outsiders, and those who spy on them risk a fate like that of Pentheus, the mythical king of Thebes. He hid to watch the maenads' secret rites, only to be discovered and torn limb from limb by the frenzied women, including his own mother, who, in her divine madness, didn't recognize her son until it was too late. Instead, you return home to prepare for your own day. The celebration of Dionysus reminds you of the complexity of Greek religion, not a single unified system, but a multi-layered tapestry of practices ranging from household rituals to civic ceremonies to mystery cults. Some Greeks participated in all these dimensions simultaneously, navigating different religious experiences for different needs. After your morning devotions, you head to the Agora for supplies. The marketplace is less crowded than usual. Many have left the city for various religious observances or are sleeping off the previous night's Dionysian revelry. Those who remain discuss the Maenads' procession in hushed tones. "My wife and daughter are among them this year," one man tells another, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "The god has called them," the other responds with a respectful nod. "They'll return blessed by his touch." Despite the patriarchal structure of Greek society, where women had few legal rights and limited public roles, religion provided spaces where women exercised significant authority. Besides the Maenads' mountain rituals, women exclusively conducted many important festivals, including the Thesmophoria for Demeter and the Arephoria for Athena. As you select olives and fresh bread from the market stalls, you notice a group gathering around a public slave who serves as the city's herald. He pounds a staff against the ground to gain attention before making an announcement. "Citizens of Athens," he proclaims, "the assembly has decreed that all men of military age must present themselves at the temple of Ares tomorrow at dawn. The omens have proved favourable for the expedition to Sicily. Preparations will begin immediately." The Peloponnesian War, the long conflict between Athens and Sparta that would ultimately lead to Athens' downfall, has been raging for years now. The ambitious Sicilian expedition of 415 BCE represents Athens' attempt to expand its influence westward, but it will end in complete disaster. Partly because the commander Alcibiades will be recalled to face those charges of impiety you overheard the women discussing yesterday. The interconnection between religion, politics, and military affairs couldn't be clearer. No significant state action occurs without divine consultation and approval. Generals sacrifice before battles, seeking favourable signs in the entrails of the victims. Unfavourable omens can delay campaigns or change strategies. Victories are attributed to divine favour, defeats to divine displeasure. As you leave the Agora with your purchases, you encounter a small crowd gathered around a man seated on a wooden platform. He's a rhapsode, a professional performer of epic poetry, reciting portions of Homer's Iliad, the ancient poem composed around the 8th century BCE, but telling of events supposedly from the 12th century BCE, remains enormously influential in Greek culture, serving almost as a religious text. You pause to listen as the rhapsode reaches a dramatic moment. The intervention of Athena to prevent Achilles from killing Agamemnon in rage. The goddess, visible only to Achilles, grabs his hair to restrain him. The audience nods appreciatively. Such direct divine interventions seem perfectly plausible to them. For the ancient Greeks, the Iliad and Odyssey weren't mere entertainment, but repositories of religious and ethical wisdom. They taught proper relationships between mortals and immortals, demonstrated the consequences of hubris, and provided examples of both heroic virtue and cautionary failure. Every educated Greek knew these stories intimately, and even the illiterate heard them performed regularly. Moving on, you decide to visit a friend who lives near the Kerameikos, Athens' main cemetery located northwest of the Agora. The Greeks placed great importance on proper funeral rites, believing that souls couldn't find peace in the underworld without them. The famous tragedy Antigone by Sophocles centers on a woman's determination to provide burial rites for her brother despite a royal prohibition, demonstrating how religious obligations sometimes superseded human law. Your friend is preparing for the third day of funeral rites for her grandfather. The initial burial occurred 2 days ago, followed by a feast at the family home. Today, family members will bring offerings to the tomb, libations of wine, honey, and milk poured through special tubes into the earth to reach the deceased, as well as garlands and small gifts. "Will you accompany me?" she asks. "Grandfather always enjoyed your company." You agree, helping her gather the offerings into baskets before walking together to the cemetery. The Kerameikos contains various types of graves, simple markers for ordinary citizens, elaborate stone monuments for the wealthy, and impressive public tombs for those who died defending Athens. Stone sculptures called stelae mark many graves, depicting the deceased bidding farewell to loved ones in poignant relief carvings. At her grandfather's tomb, your friend performs the rituals with practiced reverence, pouring the libations and arranging fresh garlands. She speaks to him as if he can hear, updating him on family matters and assuring him of their continued care. Though the body lies buried, Greeks believed the psyche, soul, retained some awareness and could be comforted by these attentions. "We must keep the third day observance, the 9th day, and then the 30th, she explains. After that, we'll remember him at the annual festivals for the dead, the Gymnasium and Nemesia, and visit with offerings on his birth date. This ongoing relationship with the deceased, maintained through regular ritual observances, gave death a different quality in ancient Greece than in many modern societies. The dead remained part of the community, requiring care and remembrance from the living, who in turn might receive protection or guidance from beyond. As you leave the cemetery, you notice dark clouds gathering. A storm is approaching, not just a natural phenomenon to ancient Greek eyes, but an expression of Zeus's power. Thunder was his voice, lightning his weapon. A violent storm might indicate his anger, gentle rain, his blessing. You hurry toward shelter as the first heavy drops begin to fall. Passing a small temple to Poseidon, you observe sailors and fishermen rushing inside to make offerings, hoping to placate the god of the sea during the storm. Their livelihoods depended entirely on his goodwill. Taking refuge beneath a covered stoa, a colonnaded walkway common in Greek architecture, you wait out the downpour alongside other stranded pedestrians. Nearby, an elderly man interprets the thunder patterns for a group of attentive listeners. 3 claps from the east. Zeus approves the assembly's decision, he declares confidently, but that long rumble from the north suggests caution in its execution. Weather signs, bird flights, unusual animal behaviour, all were potential messages from the gods requiring interpretation. Professional seers and diviners made their living providing such services, though educated Greeks increasingly questioned these practices. Philosophers like Xenophanes criticised anthropomorphic conceptions of the gods, while medical writers like Hippocrates sought natural explanations for phenomena previously attributed to divine action. Yet even these rational thinkers rarely denied the gods' existence outright. Instead, they reinterpreted divine nature in more abstract terms. Socrates was executed partly for introducing new gods, not for atheism, but for his unconventional religious views. Complete denial of the divine remained almost unthinkable. As the rain slackens, you continue on your way, careful to avoid puddles that have turned the city's unpaved streets muddy. You're heading toward the outskirts of Athens to visit a small shrine dedicated to the hero Theseus, the mythical king who unified Attica and defeated the Minotaur. Heroes occupied a middle ground in Greek religion, not fully gods, but more than mortals, usually legendary figures from the past who had achieved remarkable feats. Heroes received cult worship at their supposed tombs or at sites associated with their exploits. Unlike the Olympian gods, whose influence extended across the Greek world, hero cults tended to be intensely local, connecting communities to their mythical past. The shrine to Theseus is modest. a small temple structure surrounding what tradition holds to be his bones, returned to Athens from the island of Skyros. Inside, votive offerings hang from the walls and ceiling, miniature bronze weapons, terracotta plaques depicting the hero's adventures, small oil lamps left burning by devotees. A stone altar outside shows dark stains from countless animal sacrifices. A young man kneels in prayer before the altar. When he finishes, you ask what blessing he seeks from the hero. Courage, he replies simply. I depart for military service tomorrow. Theseus represents the ideal Athenian warrior, brave but also intelligent and just. I hope some portion of his Arete might strengthen me. Arete, often translated as virtue or excellence, was a central concept in Greek ethics. Each deity or hero embodied specific forms of excellence that Greeks might emulate. Athena's wisdom, Apollo's self-control, Heracles' endurance, Theseus's courage. Religious devotion wasn't just about avoiding divine wrath, but about aspiring to these ideals. The young soldier's prayer reminds you of the ephebic oath sworn by all Athenian young men when they began their military training. The oath invoked various gods and heroes as witnesses and promised to bring no disgrace to our sacred arms and to transmit this city not only not less, but greater and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us. Religious devotion, civic duty, and personal honour were inseparably intertwined. As afternoon wanes, you make your way to a friend's house for a small dinner gathering. Symposia, drinking parties following the evening meal, were important social institutions where men, typically excluding women except for entertainers or servants, reclined on couches, shared diluted wine, and engaged in conversation on topics from politics to philosophy to poetry. Your host welcomes you warmly. Several guests have already arrived and recline on cushioned couches arranged in a U shape. Slaves carry in the first dishes: vegetables, fish, a little meat. Meat remained a luxury in ancient Greece, consumed regularly only by the wealthy, or during religious festivals when sacrificial animals were distributed. Before eating, your host performs the customary rituals: a hand-washing ceremony, then the setting aside of portions for the gods with appropriate prayers. As the meal progresses and wine begins to flow, always mixed with water, drinking undiluted wine was considered barbaric. The conversation turns to religious matters. Did you hear about Dionysus? One guest asks. The assembly has issued a death sentence against him in absentia. He fled to Sparta. What was his crime? Inquires another. Impiety of the most extreme sort. He not only revealed the secrets of the Elusinian mysteries, but actually mocked them. And he published arguments denying the god's existence entirely. A shocked silence falls over the gathering. Dionysus of Melos was one of the few true atheists in recorded ancient Greek history. His writings haven't survived, but he reportedly ridiculed religious practices and argued that chance, not divine will, governed the world. For these views, Athens condemned him to death around 415 BCE. Such thoughts lead only to chaos, your host says finally. Without the gods, what binds us to justice? What gives meaning to our oaths, our treaties, our laws? What explains the order of the cosmos? Some philosophers argue that nature follows its own laws without divine governance, offers a thoughtful guest. Anaxagoras proposed that the sun is merely a hot stone, not the god Helios in his chariot. And he was prosecuted for impiety and expelled from Athens, another reminds him. There are boundaries to speculation. This tension between traditional religion and philosophical inquiry characterized intellectual life in classical Athens. The city that celebrated free speech and democratic governance also enforced religious orthodoxy through impiety trials. Anaxagoras, Protagoras, Socrates, Aristotle all faced charges related to religious offences, suggesting the limits of Athenian tolerance when core beliefs were questioned. The symposium continued continues late into the evening, with topics shifting from religion to politics to a friendly contest of improvised poetry. Finally, drowsy from wine and conversation, you bid your host farewell and make your way home through darkened streets. The night is clear now after the storm, and you pause to look up at the star-filled sky. To Greek eyes, the patterns overhead weren't random, but divine signs organised into constellations representing mythological figures placed in the heavens by the gods. Astronomers like Eudoxus were beginning to track celestial movements systematically, but even their proto-scientific approach incorporated religious understanding of cosmic order. Reaching home, you tend to your household shrine one final time before retiring. This daily rhythm of devotion, morning and evening prayers, libations before meals, observance of festivals and special occasions, structures your existence as it does for all Greeks. Religion isn't a separate domain of life, but the lens through which all experience is interpreted. As you drift towards sleep, you reflect on the complex web of beliefs and practices you've navigated today. Greek religion offers no unified theology, no canonical texts, no central authority. Instead, a rich tapestry of overlapping traditions serving different needs. Civic cults maintain community bonds and divine favour for the polis. Household worship protects the family's daily existence. Mystery religions promise personal transformation and blessed afterlife. Hero cults connect communities to their mythical past. Through these varied practices, Greeks negotiate their relationship with powers they perceive as both essential to human flourishing and potentially devastating when offended. The same gods who bring life-giving rain can send destructive storms. Those who ensure fertility can also blight crops. Those who grant victory in battle can turn the tide against you. In this world permeated by divine presence, nothing is truly secular. Political decisions, military actions, artistic creations, athletic competitions, medical treatments, all have religious dimensions. The Greeks have no word that precisely corresponds to our religion, because they have no concept of a non-religious sphere of life. The gods are everywhere, always. Your consciousness begins to fade, sleep claiming you as the gentle Mediterranean night deepens. Perhaps Morpheus, god of dreams, will visit you with visions, prophetic, symbolic, or merely the mind's own creations clothed in divine authority. In a world where the boundary between human and divine remains permeable, even sleep brings no complete escape from the gods' watchful presence. They surround you, shape your destiny, demand your attention, the inescapable reality of life in ancient Greece. Your dreams are troubled this night. In them, you stand before a massive three-headed dog, Cerberus, guardian of the underworld, while shadowy figures judge your worth on scales of gold. You wake with a start, heart pounding, as the first light of dawn filters through your window. The dream lingers, its imagery uncomfortably vivid. Dreams held special significance for the ancient Greeks. They could be messages from the gods, prophecies of events to come, or reflections of divine displeasure. Homer describes dreams as passing through gates of horn, true dreams, or gates of ivory, false dreams. Some temples, particularly those dedicated to Asclepius, practiced incubation, the ritual practice of sleeping within sacred precincts to receive healing or prophetic dreams. After performing your morning rituals at the household shrine with particular care, the dream has left you feeling vulnerable. You decide to consult a professional dream interpreter. Such specialists were common in ancient Greece, helping people understand the divine messages encoded in their nocturnal visions. You find the interpreter in a small shop near the Agora, surrounded by scrolls and curious amulets. She's an elderly woman with keen eyes that seem to look through rather than at you. For a small fee, she listens intently as you describe your dream of Cerberus and the shadowy judges. "You've been visited by a true dream," she pronounces after careful consideration. "The three-headed guardian suggests a crossroads in your life, three paths before you. The judges represent the weight of your choices." She pauses, studying your face. "Have you made proper offerings to Hermes lately? As psychopomp, guide of souls, he governs transitions. His favour would be valuable to you now." You thank her, resolving to visit Hermes' shrine later today. Whether or not you fully believe in her interpretation, the practice brings a certain psychological comfort. In a world filled with uncertainty and forces beyond human control, divination practices provided Greeks with a sense of agency and understanding. Divination took many forms in ancient Greece. Besides dream interpretation, common methods included examining the entrails of sacrificed animals, hepatoscopy, observing the flight patterns of birds, augury, interpreting the rustling of leaves at sacred sites like Dodona, and consulting oracles, the most famous being the Oracle of Apollo at Delphi. The Delphic oracle served as perhaps the most important religious institution in the ancient Greek world. States consulted her before major decisions like founding colonies or declaring war. Individuals sought guidance for personal matters. Her pronouncements, delivered in trance-like states and often ambiguous, were considered direct communications from Apollo. As you make your way through the morning crowds, you notice a commotion near one of the city gates. A group of dusty travellers has arrived, clustering around what appears to be a wounded man carried on a makeshift stretcher. Curious, you draw closer to listen. "The bandits came from nowhere," one traveller explains to the gathering crowd. "We fought them off, but Timon took an arrow in the thigh. We need to get him to the Asclepian immediately." The Asclepian, sanctuary of Asclepius, god of healing, functioned as a combination of religious site and medical centre. Patients would undergo purification rituals, make sacrifices to the god, and sleep within the sacred precinct, hoping for healing either through divine dreams or the practical treatments administered by priest-physicians. You watch as the wounded man is carried toward the sanctuary, his companions chanting prayers to Asclepius. The Greeks approached healing as both a practical and religious matter. Hippocrates and his followers were developing what we might recognize as scientific medicine, seeking natural causes for diseases and natural remedies. Yet even these physicians acknowledged divine powers and often worked within religious healing sanctuaries. "The arrow missed the vital spots," comments a bystander who appears to be a physician. "If infection doesn't set in, and if Asclepius is favourable, he should recover." This dual approach, practical treatment combined with divine propitiation, characterized much of Greek problem-solving. They didn't see a contradiction between seeking natural causes and acknowledging divine influence. The same farmer who carefully selected the best soil and seeds for planting also made offerings to Demeter for a bountiful harvest. Continuing toward the Agora, you encounter a small procession making its way through the streets. A family leads a sheep garlanded with flowers, accompanied by flute players. They're heading toward the temple of Zeus, likely to fulfill a vow made for some blessing received. Recovery from illness, safe return from travel, birth of a child, or successful business venture. Vow fulfillment formed an important aspect of Greek religious practice. When facing difficulty or desiring special favour, Greeks would promise specific offerings or actions to the gods if their prayers were answered. These promises created binding obligations. Failing to fulfill a vow after receiving divine help was considered not just impious but dangerous, inviting divine retribution. In the Agora, you find the usual morning bustle intensified by preparations for an upcoming festival. Workers erect temporary wooden stands for spectators. Merchants arrange special displays of festival foods and offerings. Young men practice for athletic competitions that will honour the gods. festivals dominated the Greek calendar. Athens alone celebrated over 120 festival days annually. Some were small, local affairs, others, like the Panathenaea honouring Athena or the Dionysia for Dionysus, were major civic events involving processions, sacrifices, athletic and artistic competitions, and public feasts. Through these elaborate celebrations, the polis collectively honoured its divine patrons, reinforced social bonds, displayed its wealth and cultural achievements, and competed with rival city-states for prestige. Religion, politics, art, and athletics blended seamlessly in these public spectacles that defined Greek civic identity. Navigating through the crowded marketplace, you notice a small gathering around a public water clock. A man in fine clothing addresses the group, gesturing emphatically. Drawing closer, you recognize him as a sophist, one of the professional teachers and orators who, for hefty fees, instructed young men in rhetoric and philosophy. Consider Protagoras' famous statement, the sophist proclaims, "Man is the measure of all things." What does this mean for our understanding of the gods? Are they objective realities or projections of human needs and fears? Philosophical questioning of traditional religion had become increasingly common in Athens during the 5th century BCE. Thinkers like Protagoras, Anaxagoras, and later Socrates examined religious beliefs critically, sometimes proposing alternative understandings of divine nature that challenged conventional anthropomorphic conceptions. Such intellectual explorations existed in uneasy tension with traditional piety. When pushed too far, they could result in charges of impiety, asabeia, as happened to Socrates in 399 BCE. His execution for corrupting the youth and not believing in the gods of the state demonstrated the limits of Athenian tolerance for religious innovation. The sophist, perhaps aware of these boundaries, quickly qualifies his provocative questions, yet we must remember that piety forms the foundation of justice. As Hesiod teaches, Zeus oversees human affairs, rewarding the righteous and punishing wrongdoers. This appeal to traditional religious ethics satisfies most listeners who nod approvingly. Greek morality was inseparable from religion. Concepts like justice, hospitality, oath-keeping, and respect for suppliants were enforced through beliefs in divine oversight and punishment. Zeus Xenios watched over the treatment of guests and strangers. Zeus Horkios guaranteed oaths. The Erinyes, Furies, pursued those who shed family blood. These divine enforcers ensured social order in ways that human legal systems could not. While Athens had developed sophisticated courts and laws, ultimate justice was believed to reside with the gods, who could see hidden crimes, punish across generations, and reach beyond the grave. Speaking of justice, you next observe a curious procession heading toward the Areopagus, the hill where Athens' most serious court cases were tried. Officials lead a solemn line of people, including what appears to be a terrified man in chains. A murder trial is about to begin. Homicide was considered not just a crime against the victim and society, but a source of miasma, religious pollution that could spread and bring divine punishment upon the entire community if not properly addressed. Murder trials therefore included purification rituals alongside legal proceedings. The accused murderer would first be required to undergo ritual washing. Witnesses swore mighty oaths, calling divine punishment upon themselves if they testified falsely. Jurors made sacrifices before hearing the case. The courtroom itself was established on ground sacred to the gods of justice. If convicted, the murderer faced not only legal punishment, typically exile or execution, but also religious consequences. Their soul might wander restlessly after death, denied proper rest in the underworld. Their family might suffer divine retribution for generations, as illustrated in tragic cycles like that of the House of Atreus, where bloodshed led to more bloodshed in an endless chain of vengeance. Moving away from the somber proceedings, you decide to visit the shrine of Hermes, as recommended by the dream interpreter. Located at a busy crossroads, the shrine consists of a simple herm, a square pillar topped with the god's bearded head and prominently featuring male genitalia. Hermes stood throughout Athens, marking boundaries and crossroads while providing divine protection for travellers. You place a small offering, a honey cake purchased from a nearby vendor, at the base of the pillar and murmur a prayer asking for the god's guidance. Several other people wait their turn, as Hermes was among the most accessible and practically helpful deities in the Greek pantheon. God of travellers, merchants, thieves, communication, transitions, and guide to the underworld, Hermes assisted in navigating life's boundaries and thresholds. After completing your devotions, you continue walking, passing by the city's gymnasium, where young men exercise and train. Physical education was inseparable from religious development in ancient Greece. Athletic competitions honoured the gods, with major events like the Olympic Games serving primarily as religious festivals dedicated to Zeus. Through the gymnasium's open doors, you glimpse nude young men wrestling, running, and practicing discus throws under the watchful eyes of trainers. The Greek ideal of Arete encompassed both physical and moral excellence, developed through disciplined training of body and character. Statues of Hermes and Heracles, patron deities of athletics, stand in prominent positions, reminding the youths that their physical development occurs under divine supervision. Nearby, a group of boys receives instruction from an older man, part of the educational process called paideia that prepared male citizens for their adult roles. The teacher recites lines from Hesiod's works and days. The gods keep hidden from men the means of life, else you would easily do work enough in a day to supply you for a full year, even without working. Soon would you put away your rudder over the smoke, and the fields worked by ox and sturdy mule would run to waste. These myths explaining human labour as divine punishment for Prometheus's theft of fire taught Greeks to accept life's hardships as divinely ordained. Yet they also emphasised human agency through work, justice, and piety. Greek religion walked a careful line between fatalism and free will, between accepting divine determination and asserting human responsibility. As the afternoon advances, you pass by a modest home where a family performs a coming-of-age ceremony for their daughter. In Athens, this would typically be the Arctea, where young girls served Artemis before marriage. Different Greek cities had various rituals marking life transitions, birth, entering adulthood, marriage, death, all supervised by appropriate deities. Artemis oversaw female transitions from childhood to adulthood, while Aphrodite governed sexual maturity and marriage. Hera protected married women, especially in childbirth. Demeter guided women through motherhood. At each life stage, women cultivated relationships with the goddesses most relevant to their current needs and challenges. Men similarly moved through life phases under divine guidance. Apollo represented the ideal of the Kouros, the beautiful youth. Hermes governed the training period of the Ephebae, the young man preparing for citizenship. Zeus embodied mature masculine authority as husband, father, and civic leader. Continuing your walk, you reach Athens' western edge, where the sacred way begins its journey to Eleusis, site of the famous Elusinian mysteries. Though the grand procession occurs only once a year, individual pilgrims regularly travel this route seeking initiation into these most revered of Greek mystery cults. Unlike public civic religion, mystery cults offered personal religious experiences and individual relationships with deities. Initiates underwent secret rituals, witnessed sacred revelations, and received promises of divine protection both in this life and after death. The exact contents of these revelations remained closely guarded secrets. Revealing them was among the worst forms of impiety. The Elusinian mysteries, dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, were the most prestigious of these cults. Their central myth, Persephone's abduction to the underworld, Demeter's grief and searching, and their eventual reunion, symbolized the cycle of death and rebirth that initiates hoped to experience spiritually. Participation promised a blessed afterlife, with initiates said to die with better hopes than the uninitiated. As you contemplate whether you might someday seek initiation, the sun begins its descent toward the horizon. You turn back toward the city centre, passing farmers returning from their fields. They look exhausted but satisfied, having completed another day's labour, under the eyes of agricultural deities like Demeter, Dionysus, and various local nymphs and nature spirits. One farmer pauses at a roadside shrine to Pan, half-man, half-goat god of wilderness and shepherds, leaving a simple offering of fresh milk. Another makes a gesture toward a sacred olive tree, believed to be connected to Athena's original gift to the city. These small devotional acts, performed without fanfare as part of daily routine, formed the foundation of Greek religious practice. Religion in ancient Greece wasn't primarily about abstract belief or weekly temple attendance, but about constant awareness of divine presence in every aspect of life. The boundary between sacred and profane remained permeable, with gods potentially present in any location or situation. Every meal, journey, business transaction, birth, death, storm, illness, or stroke of good fortune had religious significance. As you navigate the increasingly shadowed streets, heading homeward with the setting sun, you pass a small temple where an evening sacrifice is underway. The scent of burning meat and fragrant herbs fills the air as priests perform the ritual that has remained largely unchanged for centuries. The animal, a sheep, has already been slaughtered according to precise ritual requirements. Selected portions, primarily fat-wrapped bones, burn on the altar as the gods share, creating the savour, believed to rise to Olympus. The remaining meat will be distributed among participants for a communal feast. This pattern of sacrifice, the central ritual act of Greek religion, established proper relations between mortals and immortals. Humans provided honours and offerings, gods provided protection and blessings. The shared meal that followed sacrifice reinforced community bonds while acknowledging divine presence at the feast. Nearing your home, you pass a neighbour making a small offering at a humble household shrine, pouring a libation of wine and placing a garland of fresh flowers before crude terracotta figurines of household Zeus and Hestia, goddess of the hearth. These intimate daily rituals, conducted without priests or public ceremony, represented the most personal dimension of Greek religious practice. "Good evening," your neighbour greets you. "Have you made your evening offerings yet?" "I'm heading home to do so now," you reply. She nods approvingly. "Best not to neglect them. My cousin forgot his household devotions for 3 days while travelling and returned to find his roof collapsed. The gods notice such things. This casual exchange highlights how thoroughly religious consciousness permeated everyday interactions. Divine causality provided explanations for otherwise random events, creating meaningful patterns from life's unpredictability. A sudden illness, divine punishment or testing, unexpected good fortune, divine favour, crop failure, divine displeasure requiring propitiation. Reaching home, you first attend to your household shrine, lighting a small oil lamp and offering the customary evening prayers and libations. These bookend rituals, morning and evening devotions, create a sacred frame around each day, acknowledging divine dominion over all human activities. After preparing and consuming a simple evening meal with the requisite offering of first portions to the gods, you sit by lamplight, perhaps working on necessary household tasks or simply resting after the day's exertions. Without modern entertainment options, evenings in ancient Greece were often spent in quiet conversation, storytelling, music-making, or contemplation. Before retiring, you step outside briefly to gaze at the night sky. To Greek eyes, the stars represented divine myths frozen in celestial patterns: Perseus, Andromeda, Orion, the Pleiades. More than beautiful natural phenomena, they were constant reminders of the gods' power to transform and immortalize. As you prepare for sleep, you reflect on the day's religious experiences, the morning dream and its interpretation, offerings at various shrines, witnessing sacrifices and ceremonies, philosophical discussions about divine nature, constant reminders of the gods' watchful presence. No aspect of the day has been truly secular, free from religious significance. This total integration of religion into everyday life distinguishes ancient Greek experience from modern secular existence. For Greeks, the gods weren't remote figures confined to weekly worship, but immediate presences whose power shaped every moment. Piety wasn't a separate moral virtue, but the foundation of all proper human activity: civic, domestic, economic, artistic, and intellectual. Settling onto your sleeping pallet, you wonder what dreams might come tonight. Will they bring divine messages, prophecies, or simply the mind's own workings clothed in mythic imagery? In the liminal space between wakefulness and sleep, the boundary between human and divine seems especially thin. As consciousness fades, you enter the realm governed by Hypnos, god of sleep, and his son Morpheus, shaper of dreams. Even in slumber, you remain under divine governance, your sleeping mind as much a site of potential divine contact as any temple or shrine. The gods are inescapable, present in waking and sleeping, in public spaces and private thoughts, in life's greatest moments and its most mundane details. This omnipresence defines the ancient Greek religious experience, a world where the divine saturates every aspect of human existence, for better or worse. You dream of Olympus that night, a magnificent mountain palace where the gods feast on ambrosia and nectar, arguing over the fates of mortals. In your dream, Zeus looks directly at you with eyes like lightning, and you wake with a gasp as the first light of dawn breaks. Was it merely imagination or a genuine divine visitation? In ancient Greece, the line between the two remained perpetually blurred. Rising from your sleeping pallet, you perform your morning devotions with special care. The dream of Zeus feels significant, perhaps even ominous. Throughout Greek mythology, direct divine attention rarely boded well for mortals. Think of Semele, who asked to see Zeus in his true divine form and was burned to ash by his glory. Or Actaeon, who accidentally glimpsed Artemis bathing and was transformed into a stag, then torn apart by his own hunting dogs. Good news, the gods could bestow tremendous blessings when pleased. Bad news, their attention often brought danger, testing, or transformation that few mortals survived intact. After completing your household rituals, you step outside to find an unusual silence. The normally bustling street is nearly empty, with shops closed and no vendors calling their wares. Then you remember, today is a major festival day, one of the occasions when normal business ceases, and the entire city focuses on religious observance. Based on the Athenian calendar, it might be the Panathenaia, Athens' greatest festival honouring its patron goddess Athena, held annually with a particularly grand celebration every 4 years. The Great Panathenaia, the festival included processions, sacrifices, athletic competitions, musical and poetic contests, and the presentation of a new peplos, robe, for the ancient wooden statue of Athena housed in the Erechtheion on the Acropolis. You join crowds flowing toward the Dipylon Gate, where the grand procession will begin its journey through the city to the Acropolis. People wear their finest clothing, and excitement fills the air. This isn't merely a religious obligation, but a joyous civic celebration. an expression of Athenian identity and pride in which religious devotion, patriotism, cultural achievement, and social bonding become indistinguishable. The procession forms with impressive order. At its head walk the city's most beautiful young men and women, selected for the honour of leading this sacred parade. Behind them come elderly men carrying olive branches, warriors in full armour, musicians playing flutes and lyres, sacrificial animals decorated with garlands, and finally the sacred peplos carried on a boat-shaped frame appearing to sail through the city streets. As the procession moves through Athens, crowds line the route, watching in reverent appreciation. Children perch on parents' shoulders to glimpse the spectacle. The elderly recall past celebrations, measuring this one against festivals of their youth. For many participants, this represents the most significant religious experience of their year, far more important than daily household worship or regular temple sacrifices. Following the procession's slow progress toward the Acropolis, you find yourself reflecting on the complex layers of meaning in this civic ritual. On one level, it honours Athena as divine protector of the city. On another, it showcases Athens' wealth, power, and cultural refinement to visitors and citizens alike. The beautiful youths, athletic competitions and artistic performances celebrate Athenian excellence. The shared experience reinforces social bonds and collective identity. This multi-dimensional nature characterizes Greek religion generally, never merely theological, but always also political, social, aesthetic, and practical. For the ancient Greeks, religion wasn't a separate domain of life, but the cultural framework that gave meaning to all activities, from governance to warfare to artistic creation to family life. Reaching the Acropolis, the procession culminates in a massive sacrifice of 100 cattle, a hecatomb, on the great altar before the Parthenon. Smoke rises from burning offerings, carrying the savour to Athena on Olympus. Afterward, the meat from sacrificed animals will be distributed throughout the city, providing a rare feast of protein for the population. Even poorer citizens who couldn't normally afford meat would participate in this communal meal, connecting religious observance with practical sustenance. Following the formal ceremonies, the festival atmosphere becomes more relaxed. Athletic competitions begin in various venues throughout the city. Artists and craftsmen display their wares. Musicians perform in streets and squares. Wine flows freely at public expense, loosening inhibitions and sparking conversation among citizens who might otherwise rarely interact across class or occupational boundaries. You wander among these festivities, observing how completely religion permeates the celebration. The athletic competitions honour divine and heroic ideals of physical excellence. Musical performances feature hymns to the gods and retellings of mythic tales. Even drinking songs often invoke Dionysus. There is no secular sphere separate from religious significance. As afternoon progresses toward evening, you find yourself drawn to a less crowded area where an elderly man addresses a small gathering. His simple clothing contrasts with the festival finery around him, and his method seems more questioning than declarative. With a start, you realise this must be Socrates, Athens' famous philosophical gadfly, whose critical inquiries into conventional wisdom have earned him both devoted followers and dangerous enemies. What do we truly know of the gods, he asks his listeners. If they are perfect as we claim, how can they experience anger or jealousy? If they are just, how can they punish the innocent alongside the guilty? If they are all-powerful, why do they require our sacrifices and prayers? These questions would have seemed deeply subversive to many Athenians, challenging fundamental assumptions about divine nature and human-divine relations. Yet Socrates professes piety, claiming his philosophical inquiries serve religious truth rather than undermining it. He argues that genuine piety requires questioning inherited beliefs rather than merely performing traditional rituals. In 399 BCE, just after the end of the Peloponnesian War, Athens will condemn Socrates to death for impiety and corrupting the youth through such questioning. His execution represents the tragic collision between philosophical inquiry and religious conservatism in a city still reeling from military defeat, which many interpreted as divine punishment for cultural and religious innovations. As twilight approaches, the festival's energy intensifies rather than diminishes. Torches are lit throughout the city, illuminating continued celebrations. On the outskirts of Athens, more ecstatic worship begins, particularly for deities like Dionysus, whose rites often involved nighttime revelry, wine-induced altered states, and emotional release from social constraints. You observe groups heading toward these more uninhibited celebrations, primarily women for the monadic rites of Dionysus, mixed groups for the Elusinian mysteries during their festival period. These mystery cults offered profound religious experiences beyond the formal civic practices, promising personal transformation and privileged afterlife to initiates. The public and private, the civic and ecstatic, the traditional and innovative, all these dimensions coexisted in Greek religious practice, fulfilling different needs. The sensible citizen participated across this spectrum, honouring traditional gods in traditional ways, while perhaps also seeking more personal religious experiences through mystery initiations or philosophical exploration. As darkness fully descends, you witness one final religious spectacle, the Panichis, an all-night celebration featuring torchlit dances and processions. Young women perform complex choreographies honouring Athena, their movements casting intricate shadow patterns against temple walls. The effect is mesmerising, beauty and devotion inseparably blended. Exhausted from the day's festivities yet spiritually invigorated, you eventually make your way home through streets still alive with celebration. Unlike modern religious observances confined to specific times and places, Greek festivals encompassed entire communities for extended periods, transforming ordinary existence into sacred time. Before sleeping, you perform abbreviated evening devotions. The gods have received abundant honours today through the public ceremonies. As you settle onto your pallet, your mind whirls with the day's religious impressions. The solemn procession, magnificent sacrifices, athletic competitions, Socratic questioning, torchlit dances. All these constitute worship in the ancient Greek understanding, not merely prayer and sacrifice, but excellence in every human endeavour offered to the gods who embody ideal forms of those same excellences. As sleep begins to claim you, your thoughts turn reflective, considering what this immersion in ancient Greek religious life has revealed. What fundamental differences separate their religious worldview from modern understandings? What similarities persist despite the millennia between? Unlike modern monotheistic religions with their all-powerful, all-good deities, Greek polytheism embraced divine multiplicity and moral ambiguity. The gods weren't uniformly benevolent, but complex personalities with their own desires, conflicts, and limitations. Zeus might embody justice, yet commit numerous injustices himself. Athena might represent wisdom, yet vindictively transform Arachne for wounded pride. This moral complexity made Greek religion psychologically realistic. The gods reflected human nature with its contradictions and flaws, merely magnified to cosmic proportions. Also, unlike many modern religions, Greek practice emphasized orthopraxy, correct action, over orthodoxy, correct belief. What mattered was performing appropriate rituals correctly, not maintaining theological purity or personal faith. A Greek could harbor private doubts about divine myths, while still participating fully in religious ceremonies. The philosophical schools, Epicureans, Stoics, Platonists, developed various theological interpretations while continuing to engage in traditional religious practices. Without sacred texts or dogmatic authority, Greek religion remained flexible and accommodating. New deities could be incorporated, foreign gods identified with Greek equivalents, local practices maintained alongside pan-Hellenic ones. This adaptability helped Greek religion evolve through changing historical circumstances, from the Bronze Age through the Classical period and into the Hellenistic era, when Greek culture spread throughout the Mediterranean and Near East. Perhaps most significantly, ancient Greek religion integrated the divine into every aspect of existence rather than separating sacred from secular. The gods weren't confined to temples or heaven, but potentially present in any location or activity. Divine causality explained everything from major historical events to individual accidents. Agricultural cycles, human reproduction, political success, artistic inspiration, mental illness, weather patterns, all manifested divine influence requiring appropriate religious response. This thoroughgoing religious consciousness created a world enchanted by divine presence, where meaning permeated every experience. Natural features, mountains, springs, trees, caves, weren't merely physical phenomena, but sites of divine power. Human achievements reflected divine inspiration and favour. Disasters indicated divine displeasure requiring correction. Nothing was random or meaningless. Everything connected to the cosmic order maintained by the gods. Yet despite these differences, certain religious fundamentals transcend historical and cultural boundaries. Like their modern counterparts, ancient Greeks sought divine protection from life's dangers and uncertainties. They craved understanding of cosmic purpose and human place within it. They used religious frameworks to establish ethical standards and social order. They created religious communities providing mutual support and shared identity. They developed rituals marking life's significant transitions: birth, maturity, marriage, death. Most poignantly, Greeks struggled with the same existential questions that haunt humanity across time. Why do the innocent suffer? What happens after death? How should we live meaningfully in a world filled with unpredictability and eventual mortality? Their religious practices and myths offered provisional answers to these unanswerable questions, providing psychological comfort and cultural stability amid life's uncertainties. As consciousness fades towards sleep, these reflections deepen your appreciation for the Greeks' religious achievement. Their gods may seem remote to modern sensibilities, their practices sometimes bizarre or even disturbing, yet they created a richly symbolic religious system that sustained one of history's most remarkable civilizations for centuries, producing enduring contributions to philosophy, literature, art, politics, and ethics that continue to shape Western culture. The Greek gods embodied both nature's power and human ideals, mediating between cosmic forces and human aspirations. Through worship, Greeks acknowledged their dependence on forces beyond human control, while cultivating excellence within human capacity. The religious system balanced resignation to fate with celebration of human agency, acceptance of mortality with striving for immortal achievement. Among the most profound Greek religious insights was the concept of sophrosyne, moderation, self-knowledge, acceptance of human limits. Nothing in excess and know thyself, inscribed at Apollo's temple at Delphi, expressed this wisdom. Humans weren't gods and shouldn't attempt to become them, the hubris that triggered divine punishment in countless myths. Yet humans could approach divine qualities through excellence in their properly human sphere. This balanced perspective offered a middle path between arrogant overreach and passive fatalism. Acknowledge divine power without abject submission. Strive for excellence without forgetting mortal limitations. Honor the gods without expecting perfect divine justice. accept death's inevitability while creating works that transcend individual mortality. Such wisdom remains valuable in any era. Modern humans, despite vast technological advances, still face fundamental existential conditions the Greeks recognized: mortality, vulnerability to forces beyond control, the need for meaning and connection. Ancient Greek religion addressed these universal human needs through its distinctive mythic framework and ritual practices. As you finally surrender to sleep, the gods of Greece, Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, Aphrodite, Dionysus, and countless others hover at the edges of consciousness. Though no longer actively worshipped, they live on as powerful archetypes in Western cultural imagination, embodying enduring patterns of human experience and aspiration. Their myths continue to illuminate human psychology. Their symbols permeate art and literature. Their ethical dilemmas provoke philosophical reflection. The Greek gods demanded respect and proper worship from mortals, but they also inspired the heights of human achievement. The same religious consciousness that filled ordinary Greeks with anxious piety produced the Parthenon, the Olympic Games, the tragedies of Aeschylus and Sophocles, the dialogues of Plato, the sculptures of Phidias, cultural treasures that transcend their religious origins to speak to universal human experience. In your dreamlike state between wakefulness and sleep, you sense that perhaps the most valuable lesson from Greek religion is its integration of the sacred into everyday existence, not segregating religious experience to specific times and places, but finding divine significance in ordinary activities, not dividing life into separate domains, religious, political, artistic, economic, but seeing all human endeavours as potentially sacred when performed with excellence and proper recognition of divine powers that sustain human existence. The ancient Greeks created a world where gods walked among mortals, where mountains and streams harboured divine presences, where dreams might carry messages from beyond, where everyday actions carried religious significance. This enchanted perspective may seem alien to modern scientific understanding, yet something in the human spirit responds to this integration of meaning into material existence, this refusal to reduce reality to mere mechanism without purpose or significance. As your consciousness finally surrenders to Hypnos, god of sleep, your last thoughts acknowledge both the vast difference between ancient Greek religious experience and modern worldviews, and the enduring human needs that religious systems across time have sought to address. The Greek gods may no longer receive sacrifices or direct human affairs, but the fundamental questions they helped humans explore remain as vital as ever: how to live meaningfully in a dangerous world, how to balance acceptance of human limitations with striving for excellence, how to create beauty and meaning that transcend individual mortality. The morning will return you to modern consciousness with its scientific explanations and technological conveniences, but perhaps something of the Greek religious perspective will remain: an appreciation for finding meaning in natural phenomena, a recognition of forces beyond human control that demand respect, an understanding that hubris still invites nemesis, an awareness that excellence in any field approaches the divine ideal it imperfectly reflects. The gods of Olympus have faded from active worship, but their archetypal powers remain embedded in Western cultural consciousness, emerging in art, literature, psychology, and philosophy. Zeus's authority, Athena's wisdom, Apollo's clarity, Dionysus's ecstasy, Aphrodite's beauty, Ares' aggression, these divine qualities continue to shape human experience and understanding, though their mythic frameworks have been replaced by scientific, psychological, or secular ethical systems. In this sense, the ancient Greek gods achieved a form of immortality beyond their active worship period, surviving not as literal divine beings receiving sacrifices, but as powerful symbolic representations of enduring patterns in human experience and aspiration. They live on in our cultural imagination, helping us articulate and understand dimensions of existence that transcend rational explanation or material reduction. As sleep finally claims you completely, the boundary between ancient and modern, divine and human, myth and reality dissolves. In dreams, perhaps, we still inhabit something like the enchanted world of the ancient Greeks, where symbols carry profound significance, where boundaries between self and other become permeable, where time operates non-linearly, where transformation reveals hidden truths. In this twilight consciousness, the Greek gods don't seem so distant after all, but present as they always were, embodiments of powers that shape human existence from within and without, given names and stories to make them comprehensible to mortal minds seeking meaning in an ultimately mysterious cosmos. When you wake tomorrow, you'll return to modern understanding with its clear divisions between myth and fact, metaphor and reality, religious and secular. Yet something valuable remains from this imaginative immersion in ancient Greek religious consciousness, an appreciation for finding divine significance in ordinary experience, for seeing the sacred not as separate from daily life, but as its deepest dimension, waiting to be recognized beneath the surface of the seemingly mundane. The ancient Greeks lived in constant awareness of the gods, finding divine presence in every aspect of existence. Their religious worldview created a universe saturated with meaning, where nothing was merely physical or accidental, but potentially revelatory of deeper patterns and purposes. While modern frameworks differ dramatically, the human need for meaning, connection, and transcendence remains. The Greeks satisfied these needs through their complex pantheon and elaborate rituals, creating a religious system that sustained their remarkable civilization through centuries of cultural flowering. Whether we approach their gods as literal beings, psychological archetypes, literary metaphors, or cultural constructs, they continue to speak to fundamental aspects of human experience: our vulnerability to forces beyond control, our capacity for both terrible destruction and astonishing creation, our search for meaning amid mortality, our aspiration toward ideals we can approach but never fully embody. In this ongoing relevance, perhaps, the Greek gods have achieved their most meaningful immortality, not as recipients of sacrifice, but as enduring symbolic expressions of what it means to be human in an awesome, beautiful, and often terrifying cosmos.